This is the story of hands. Hands that were once empty, angry, and overlooked. But through a mother's prayer, a library's silence, and a God who never let go, those same hands became instruments of healing. This is where it all began.
Welcome back. Today we're going from page to purpose with gifted hands. Part 1, From Dummy to Destiny.
Ben Carson was 8 years old the day his father walked out. He didn't leave a note, just an absence that swallowed the house whole. His mother, Sonia, sat her two boys down in their Detroit home. She didn't cry in front of them. She simply said, "We're going to be fine." And then she went out to work. The poverty came quickly, hand-me-downs, empty cupboards. Ben learned early that the world sees you differently. When your clothes are patched and your lunch money is missing, he carried that weight to school every day, a silent shame he couldn't name. The little boy who once dreamed of adventure now just dreamed of being invisible. But invisibility for a poor black boy in 1960s Detroit was never really an option. At school, the label was quick and cruel: dummy. Ben wasn't just behind. He was the worst student in his class. Every test came back bleeding red ink. Every raised hand in class was someone else's. The laughter was a daily drumbeat. And because he couldn't fight the whole world with his grades, he began to fight with his fists. Rage became his only language. The boy who felt worthless on the inside made sure everyone on the outside stayed far away. He threw rocks. He screamed. He started to believe the label himself. Dummy. You hear it enough, and it stops being an insult and starts being an identity. The only thing that outgrew his shame was his anger. But God had placed a watchman in Ben's life. Sonia Carson had only a third-grade education. She cleaned houses for a living. She couldn't always help with homework. But she had a spine of steel and a faith that moved mountains. She saw her sons slipping into a grave the world had already dug for them, and she decided not on her watch. So she made a radical choice. She turned off the television, not for a day, for good. She laid down a new law in the Carson house: 2 library books a week, and a written report on each. She didn't ask the school for permission. She didn't ask if the boys liked it. She just did it. Then she knelt beside her bed and prayed. A woman with nothing but a mop, a Bible, and a vision, marching into a battle for her sons' minds. At first, Ben hated it. The library felt like a prison. The books were thick and unkind, and the report pages were blank and waiting. He stared at them, sometimes without writing a single word. But Sonia would not bend. Every week, same question. Where are your 2 books? Where are your reports? She would read each page slowly, nod, and mark it with a check, so convincingly that Ben and Curtis never doubted her. Only later did Ben learn the truth. His mother, with her third-grade education, could barely read those pages. She was performing faith she did not yet have, because she believed the books would do what she could not. Then something shifted. Ben found books about animals first. He had always loved animals. From there, he wandered into rocks, rivers, planets, and the deep sea. With every page, the world inside him grew larger than the one outside his front door. He discovered that reading was not a punishment. It was a doorway. One afternoon, a teacher held up a black, glassy rock and asked if anyone knew what it was. Silence. Then Ben raised his hand. "Obsidian," he said. "It's volcanic glass." The room went still. The boy they called Dummy had answered correctly. And not because he guessed, but because he had read it in a book. That single moment rewired something in him. He was not stupid. He never had been. He was just unread. It was a tiny victory, but for a boy starved of dignity, it tasted like a feast. The boy who couldn't read was becoming the boy who couldn't stop. But the anger didn't just vanish because the books arrived. It lurked underneath. One afternoon, a small argument with a friend over nothing turned into a storm. Ben picked up a rock and hurled it with everything inside him. It shattered a window. The sound of breaking glass was also the sound of a mirror. He saw what he was becoming. A boy who could hurt, who could destroy, who could waste everything his mother was fighting for. He stood there, breathing hard, looking at his own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. And he was terrified of them. The real breaking point came with a knife. Ben was 14. A friend named Bob, over something so trivial neither could later recall it, pushed him to the edge. In a blind rage, Ben grabbed a camping knife and lunged at Bob's stomach. By the grace of God, Ben will tell you it was nothing less. The blade struck Bob's metal belt buckle and snapped. It broke in two. The knife meant to take a life lay in pieces on the ground. Bob was unharmed. But Ben's soul was shattered. He ran home, locked himself in the bathroom, and fell to the floor. He saw clearly, maybe for the first time, the monster inside him. He was no different than the men he had seen on the news. He was a murderer waiting to happen. And he couldn't fix it by reading more books. He needed a different kind of rescue. So there, on the cold bathroom tile, a 14-year-old boy who had been called dummy, and worse, did the most intelligent thing he had ever done. He prayed, "Lord, take this temper, I can't carry it anymore." When Ben rose from that floor, something had shifted. Not all at once, God rarely works that way. But a seed had been planted. He poured himself into Proverbs, into prayer, into the hard work of letting God reshape his heart. The temper didn't vanish. Some days it still rose hot in his chest, especially when the world pushed him. But he was learning to take it to God before he took it out on anyone else. Back in school, the world had not changed. Racial prejudice still walked the hallways. Some teachers looked at a black boy with high grades and assumed the worst. Some classmates used words meant to cut. Low expectations came wrapped as advice. Maybe college isn't for you. But something in Ben had already changed. He had met a boy in a bathroom mirror who could have become a killer, and he had watched God break him and remake him. So he decided he would not fight with his fists. He would fight with his mind. He answered every insult with an A, every closed door with a book, every doubt with a demonstration of what God could do through a surrendered life. The boy who had been last in his class rose to the top of it, not because school became easy, but because he had learned to outwork everyone else. By the time he finished high school, the evidence was undeniable. The little boy from Detroit, the one they called Dummy, stood among the best. ROTC would soon teach him leadership. Yale would test his faith. But before any of that, he had already learned the one lesson that would carry him through all of it. The hand that once held a rock and a broken knife was being shaped into something the world would one day call gifted. But Ben would always call it grace. Thank you for walking through these first chapters with me. If this summary stirred something in you, subscribe and join me for part 2, where a young Ben Carson steps into Yale, faces impossible odds, and discovers the miracle that will define his calling. But before then, practice one thing you picked from the video today. Remember, it's page to purpose. See you in the next one.